Hello and welcome to the Gaming with Science podcast, where we talk about the science behind some of your favorite games.
Today, we're going to discuss Holotype by Brexwerx Games. Hey, this is Brian.
This is Jason.
This is Will.
This is David.
Will and David. David and Will.
That's us. We're new.
Where are you guys from?
We are the hosts of Common Descent, a podcast about paleontology, Earth history, evolution. We are also fellow DragonCon science track folks.
Yeah.
And we do a lot of science communication and stuff. We are both paleontologists.
So I ask for the benefit of the listeners. I know who you guys are very well because I've been a listener of Common Descent, not since the beginning, but for a very long time. Very excited to have you here. In fact, when I first saw the game, Holotype, that we're going to be talking about today, it immediately sparked in my mind, I wonder if I can get Will and David to come and guest on our podcast if I get this game. And it happened, and it's awesome.
The stars have aligned.
Yes.
Yeah, we actually played at the museum,
Yeah.
which was very fun.
Very fitting.
No dinosaurs at Gray, of course.
No,
But-
no. Well, we have some birds. We've got
birds.
about a dozen different types of birds.
But anyway, why don't we do our little science banter first? Is there some interesting bit of science you learned about or would like to talk about?
Absolutely. The one that's fresh on my mind, which is a study on the specimen of Borealopelta, which is a ridiculously well-preserved ankylosaur, or nodosaur specifically, armored dinosaur. It's 3D preserved, stomach content, skin pigment, one of the, if not the best preserved dinosaur we've ever found. This study was looking at the fact that the keratin, the horny material on the armor, is also preserved, and we've never gotten that before. So they were looking at what is the actual status and state of this keratin on this armored dinosaur. They took the measurements of like the thickness and the coverage and how it interacts with all of the armor plates. And what they were able to do that had never been able to be done before is actually say, how does this modify the defensive aspects of this armor? Because we knew they had Barney armor, and we knew it probably had a keratin covering, but now we actually have the entire armor, both parts, and so we can actually see what forces it can take. And I don't remember the exact numbers, but the rough equivalence that they gave for the force that this armor combination should be able to take is about that of a high-speed car crash, which is ridiculous, and as they noted, way more than what would be required to survive like a predator bite for that time, even the big theropod dinosaurs. So most likely, this was when Borealopeltas fought each other so that they could survive the damage that was being dealt by another Borealopelta.
Holy cow. Like, evolution does not make things that big just for kicks and giggles. Like, you
Yes.
don't get that overkill without there being a very good reason.
Absolutely.
I'll add a smaller science fact onto that the bony armor that ankylate armored dinosaurs have is bones that grow in the skin, which
Yes.
are called osteoderms, which are also present in a bunch of other dinosaurs, in a bunch of modern lizards, in alligators and crocodiles, as well as armadillos and ground sloths.
Yeah.
Have osteoderms.
Ground sloths.
Not most
Yeah.
of those could not survive a car crash. No. Armadillos very famously do not survive car crashes. But yeah, ground sloths, they didn't have a full like coat of it like an armadillo, but they did have like patches of osteoderms.
And they look like pebbles. They look like rocks. It's very irregular in shape.
Anyway, I'm glad you guys didn't steal my science fact. I looked one up. It was this study that came out only a week or two ago studying not the dinosaurs themselves, but what they ate in Poland. And so finding all these things. So looking at dinosaur poop, dinosaur vomit, and dinosaur intestine contents.
I'm sorry, what?
Yeah.
It's a very cool study.
It's awesome.
Is that a regurgitolite?
Yes.
I have all the words here. So dinosaur poop is coprolites. Vomit is regurgitolites. Fossilized contents of digestive tracts are cololites. And together, these are classed as bromellites. So all these wonderful names for basically post-processed dinosaur food.
Yes.
Or mid-process.
Or mid-process. But basically, there's apparently a very good climatic record around when the dinosaurs came to power, when they really ascended and became the dominant like land vertebrate. they looked at these over time, and they were able to do a lot of really high resolution scanning and such, and find, oh, here's beetles and fish scales and all sorts of things, and look at how dinosaur diets changed over time as they came to dominate the landscape. And I believe the take home is that dinosaurs diversified their diet and sort of spread out and just started filling out the niches and essentially just pushing everything else out over time.
Yeah, one of the main takeaways from that paper was actually that it was this complex process that happened over some 30 million years. So there was probably a big combination of dinosaurs being better adapted for certain things, but also major environmental changes that left ecosystem spaces open. So it would have been this combination of them outcompeting other animals and getting lucky, and filling in spaces that had been recently emptied.
And it also happened in this like interesting step pattern.
Yes.
It wasn't a continuous just blob. Like it was very, these things, these shifts happen and then these shifts happen. And they slowly, much more like a monopoly forming, where just slowly they take on different competitors.
Oh, it's like a game of Risk.
Yes.
Putting it back in game form.
Yes,
Just
yes.
slowly, something sort of like starts to move out, and they're like, well, we'll just take that.
Yep.
We'll take that niche. Oh, well, we'll take this other niche.
Yes, yes.
Since you two were so delighted by the different lights that refer to various dinosaur excrements and internal stuff, I will add one more as a bonus fun fact. I think there's at least 2 examples of this, but I think the original one was in like Colorado from a fossil deposit with a lot of dinosaur footprints on it, that there were these unusual traces in the sediment that research found can be replicated by pouring liquid from a few feet up in the air onto sand, and they described them as Eurolights, or dinosaur pea traces.
That's absolutely fantastic. Oh, man.
So segueing into the game, of all of those, we do actually have coprolites in the game. You can collect dinosaur poop. Not the other ones, though. Those will have to wait for an expansion.
Yes. That would be, oh man, that would be such a great expansion.
Yeah, the What Comes Out of Dinosaurs expansion. You get eggs, and you can get regurgitolites, gastroliths, which are stomach stones.
Yeah, gastroliths are in there already. Okay, I think this is our perfect segue into the game. We should talk about the game, probably, right? Okay, so let's talk about Holotype. Holotype is published by Brexwerx Games and was designed by Brett Harrison and Lex Terrangin, who are the namesakes of Brexwerx, Brett and Lex.
Nice.
Right, so they not only created the game, but they also formed the company to sell Holotype, to produce Holotype. They do have a few other games. It's mostly expansions of Holotype. So, for instance, the game that we played is actually Mesozoic North America, but they also have Mesozoic Europe. They have a mini expansion, which has the pterosaurs, which we played. And they have a new expansion, which actually I figured that Will would be excited about because they added a new creature type.
Rurotarsi.
Yes.
Ooh.
Yes.
So that is stem crocodiles and crocodilomorphs.
Yes.
Right?
It's the croc side of the Archosaur family tree.
Yeah, Rauersuchians and stuff like that.
Yeah, or Pseudotsuchians.
Yeah, they include a bunch of what were the big land predators before dinosaurs stepped in that role. So a bunch of big, not really very crocky, but like tall crocs. Very tall heads and tall bodies.
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome.
I demand a Lepidosaurs update.
Well, the funny thing is that they have this expansion to add them to North America because they're already in the Mesozoic Europe as a base part of the game. So they had to release, there's this creature type from North America as well.
Nice.
They do have one other game. It is called Eight-Legged Peacocks. It is about jumping spiders. It is a card game matching their jumping spider to their mating dance. I haven't played it, but that's pretty much it. That's their entire library of games.
That sounds great.
Oh, that's adorable. That's such a good name.
Brett is the dinosaur nerd. He's been very clear about that. In fact, I watched an interview that he did where he brought on a dinosaur book that I think he said his grandfather gave him when he was 6 from the library that was never returned. He just kept it.
They had to make and sell this game so that they could pay for the return fee.
those library fees.
He actually is a computer scientist. but went to UC Berkeley and took a ton of paleontology electives. So just like always was a lifelong lover of paleontology. And when he met Lex in Arizona, because they basically made friends playing board games, and evidently the name Holotype, Brett said, "Oh no, we're going to make this game Holotype." He had the name before he had the mechanics of the game.
Cool.
Both in the interview as well as in the Kickstarter and the description, accuracy, scientific accuracy was a really important part of this game. But they also wanted it to be balanced and fun to play. And they used a really interesting strategy to do that. In addition to human playtesting, they also used Board Game Simulator and a Python program to play the game 10,000 times a minute to balance the game exactly how they wanted it to be, so that there was never going to be an imbalance with certain play strategies.
That's really cool.
I contacted Brett, and we're going to be interviewing him for a bonus episode about that playtesting process. And so listeners, that will go up as a bonus episode, hopefully, probably about 2 weeks after this episode drops.
This was during COVID, so they were doing all this online testing. What is the game actually itself, right? So there's a little bit of the inspiration and the balancing and all that. So it is a worker placement game. This is one of those classic Euro-style board games where you have meeples, little wooden figures that will take your places. You place them on the board at a certain location. Place a worker, do an action. Place a worker, do an action. Place a worker, do an action. But this game, it has dinosaurs in it, but you're not playing as the dinosaurs. You're actually playing as the paleontologists. So you actually have 3 types of worker. You have your paleontologist, your grad student, and your field researcher, or as Jason and I like to call them, the PI, the principal investigator, the grad student, and the undergraduate. Those 3 workers on that academic rank affects their abilities. So the field researcher can't do everything that the paleontologist can do. The graduate student can do almost everything that the paleontologist can do. The paleontologist can still displace them from a position. This is actually a worker displacement game. You can kick out somebody of a lower academic rank than you from wherever they happen to be sitting.
Yes.
Yeah, this is very different from a lot of the other ones I've played, where you have turns. Like we've played Cytosis, we played Wingspan, where you have a certain number of moves per turn, you do all your moves, and then everyone takes their pieces back. This one, there's no turns. You're continually pushing and you're continually kicking each other off of spaces by essentially pulling rank, because the different pieces can only kick off someone of the same rank or lower. So your poor little field assistant undergraduate can only kick off another undergraduate. They can't kick off the paleontologist professor or a graduate student.
Which, it sounds really mean. And when you describe it, it sounds like, oh, that's so mean. But actually, the game kind of requires it to happen. You're actually, it's helpful to get booted off from where you are, because now you get to do something different. So I don't know. It should feel like you're being mean, but actually when you're playing the game, you're hoping that somebody kicks you off of your spot. Let's see. So in terms of where can you go? So the game has a central mat, and that has all the different locations you could go. You could do your field expedition. Your field expedition are to all of these actual geologic formations in North America that are associated with deposits of different ages. So Triassic, Jurassic, Cretaceous, the 3 different ages in the Mesozoic. It's a deck of cards. You flip it over, and it'll tell you, oh, this is a Cretaceous site. You can roll this many dice to generate your fossils. And you'll roll them to see how many of the little cubes you get of the same color, and those come back to your mat. They take up physical space. You only have so many spaces you can store them. You have the museum, where you can go and you can trade your fossils. It's like, well, I've got these Triassic fossils, but I actually really need some Cretaceous. So there's like an exchange rate with the Triassic being more valuable. There's the University Library, where you collect research cubes. There's the Specimen Lab, where you'll draw from this deck of, I guess I can't call them dinosaur cards, because you also have marine reptiles. There's 4 different groups in the base game, plus pterosaurs. There's sauropods, theropods, marine reptiles, and then another one called Dinosaurs, which I want to come back to as well, because I had never heard that term until I played Holotype. I guess it was originally ornithopods, and that's where that scientific accuracy said that, well, some of these actually don't count. Sorry, I'm getting in the weeds a little bit.
For a little spoiler, I actually, having reflected on it, I really like that they went with Dinosaur.
Yeah.
I appreciate that choice. We'll come back to why, but that's a little teaser for that discussion.
All right, cool. And then, of course, in the middle of the board, there is the most important place, where you publish. There's one spot that you can publish at, and you can publish one of your holotypes. So you take your dinosaur cards, it's going to have a certain amount of research cube cost and associated fossil cube costs. You pay that, you get to publish the holotype. Guys, what is a holotype?
A holotype is the term that's used for the reference specimen for a species. So this happened that we use these in paleontology, we use these in modern biology. When a scientist identifies a new species of whatever, dinosaur, plant, whatever it is, the naming of that new species must be associated with a detailed description of what characterizes the species, what features make it different from any other similar species. And you have to designate at least one example that shows those features.
Yeah.
This fossil, this skeleton of this dinosaur is the specimen that goes along with the original description. So in the future, if somebody wants to compare to this species, this is the reference specimen.
Yeah, you have established that if you need to see what I mean by all of these features, this specimen has all of those features.
Yes. A lot of dinosaurs are only holotypes.
Yes.
There's only one specimen that is known. It is the holotype. Other species, there are tons of fossils, and one of them is the holotype.
And very often, a lot of those are a very partial specimen.
Yeah, like a jaw.
Yeah. It's enough to know that no one else has a jaw like this that we've ever found before. But this is what we have. But it's enough to say it's a new species.
Well, and like Carnotaurus, the very famous predatory dinosaur with the bulldog face and the horns above its eyes, is only known from a holotype skeleton.
Yeah.
There's one skeleton.
We haven't found any more of them.
Really?
It's a very well-preserved skeleton.
Yes.
But it's just the one.
Yeah, and I learned while we were there at the museum. So your friend who's the curator there back in the specimen lab, was that Sean?
Sean is the lab manager and head preparator.
Yep.
So he was walking me around the mastodon skull that he is slowly reassembling. That is the holotype for apparently a mastodon that is a new species discovered there at Gray. And he was explaining, because it's the holotype, there can't be any guesswork.
Yeah.
Like he has to be able to match up the bones precisely. This little postage stamp piece goes exactly next to this little postage stamp piece. And if there's any little part that got wore away where it's like, okay, maybe it's off by like half a millimeter or a millimeter, he can't just stick it on there and say, this is probably where it went, because it has to be absolutely precise. And so just because it has to be that reference that other people have to come and say, we know this for 100% certain was like this. There's no guesswork involved.
Yes.
Yeah. And when you're working with a holotype, it might be the only one you ever get.
Yeah.
Like, they may never get another mastodon skull at Gray.
Like there are examples where you'll get later specimens that may be better than your holotype, and then you can kind of upgrade. And
there's all sorts. There are paratypes and lectotypes and neotypes for all like the different ways that you can adjust your collection.
So like that sometimes happens, but yeah, there's tons of examples where it's like, yeah, we have 3. 2 of them are enough that we could identify them, and then there's the holotype. And that's all we have.
At the Gray Fossil Site, for example, the new species of red panda that was discovered there, the holotype is a single tooth.
Yes.
There are now 3 nearly complete skeletons, but the original description was a single tooth.
There's a couple things I want to talk about there. First of all is the fact that the Gray Fossil Site is in Tennessee, and we're talking about red pandas. So that's worth pausing and talking about, is that there were red pandas in Tennessee 5 million years ago, 6 million years ago?
It's about 5 million years ago.
And not to mention alligators. So that was really cool. Go to Gray if you have the opportunity.
Yeah, red pandas, gators, rhinos.
Camels, horses.
Super weird time.
Snakes, songbirds.
Tons of snakes.
Everything.
Well, it's a fun thing because there's a whole bunch of things there, like the turtles and a lot of the birds that if you only saw those when you time traveled back to the fossil site, you wouldn't have known you time traveled, except that it was too warm. And then a bunch of the other things that if you only saw those, you would be very hard to convince someone we did not take them to like Africa or something.
Right.
That they're like
rhinos and elephants.
You
and
can't
stuff.
move me and time travel at the same time. That doesn't count. So, no, you still are in Tennessee, I promise.
Yes.
I also found out that there was native citrus there, which is crazy.
Yeah.
So again, because we're kind of plant guys a little bit, right?
Yep.
When you publish, you can publish a holotype, sort of declaring a new species or publishing a new species, but that's not the only thing that you can do. You can also publish towards these common goals, basically a synthesis or a research paper or review where you're publishing based on what other people have done. So for that, you have to pay the research cubes. If you haven't published all of the corresponding holotypes, it's like a public goal. You'll also have a secret private goal that you're trying to have people not see what it is, but it's usually not that hard to figure out. Presumably, if you played the game a couple more times. So, like, I'm pretty sure that Jason's going for a bunch of Triassic stuff on purpose, right? That is the basics of the game, I think. Is there anything that I crucially missed?
Only thing I can think of is the game tracks how many total holotypes are published. And as you go up, it unlocks various things in the game. So
Yes.
we'll do a reset of the museum. It unlocks little upgrades. And typical thing, you get 4 upgrades over the course of the game. There are 5 or 6 to choose from, so you never get them all. But they're a way of getting more powerful. And I like it because this game caught me off guard with how much strategic depth there is, because there's a lot of decision points you can make that have effects on the game, and possibly due to all the 10,000 games per second playtesting, none of them is clearly, oh, this is the one upgrade to rule them all. This is the one path that's definitely. It all seems like there's a good argument for any choice you could make.
I don't know. Every one of us chose that extra storage closet for fossils as the first thing,
It's so tempting.
That's just because we're all
Yes.
hoarders.
Yep.
It's so nice to be, but I want the backpack.
The game also, because there are so many different options, it allows you to do something that I always find myself doing when I play board games, which is role playing a little bit.
Yeah.
Getting a little bit into like,
leaning into a shtick or
yeah,
something.
I'm not just trying to win. I am sort of trying to embody a character and follow a certain style of what would I want to publish? How would I want to publish? And I do that partially because it's fun and partially because it's an easy way to get over decision paralysis,
Yes.
Which I get a lot in games that have a lot of strategic pieces.
I will say it was really fun watching you guys, because I was here making strategic decisions based off of point values, and just watching you geek out over like, oh, this is a cool dinosaur. I have to publish this one.
Oh yes, we were both like repeatedly. Brian was very upset with me because both of us, I think, because we kept throwing away valuable cards because we liked the other ones better. I was like, yeah, but this is Triceratops. I gotta do Triceratops.
I think you had Triceratops, Tyrannosaurus Rex. What else did you have?
I managed. I was very proud. I didn't win, but I was very proud that I got T-Rex, Deinonychus. I think Triceratops was the one I didn't.
Yeah, you almost.
I almost
you were working
managed to
toward that
publish
one.
Triceratops. I got a bunch of the classics.
Yeah.
I had Stegosaurus. I think.
Stegosaurus.
Yeah,
You
it was
got the
great.
ones that come in the sets of plastic dinosaur toys.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, I almost had a full
Yeah.
tube.
You just need a random Dimetrodon in there.
Yes,
and you-
exactly.
It's like these dinosaur cards. I mean, they're along the lines of a lot of the good science games. They have random science facts on them that have nothing to do with the game, but that are still really
Yeah.
cool. They have a little line of text that explains what the name means. So Tyrannosaurus Rex is like was it Tyrant King Lizard
Yeah.
or something. Gojirasaurus, which is Godzilla lizard. And they also have who first published that particular dinosaur specimen and what year it was in. And some of these are back into the mid 1800s, and some of them are just a handful of years ago. So they have a widespread.
Some of them must have been contemporary with the publication of the game, right? Because
Yeah.
2022 can't be anything newer than that.
Yep.
Yes, high point of the game is when I published a holotype that you two didn't recognize. It's like, wait, what's
That was
that?
fun.
Yeah.
What's that thing?
They included some really recent and well, and I assume that was part of the necessity of spreading it across time effectively. And right, if you need a certain number of Triassic dinosaurs, you're gonna start pulling obscure ones because there's not that many famous Triassic dinosaurs.
You're gonna run out of recognizable ones because there's like 3.
But of course, this is how they become recognizable.
Yes.
Is that the names get used in popular uses like this.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, though, there's one thing that I wish the cards did have and they don't, and that's a pronunciation guide.
That would be a really nice feature for people seeing them for the first time, especially. Like, if this is the first time you've ever seen, even ones that are not uber obscure, but like Coelophysis, where
Sure. Or Deinonychus.
Those pronunciations are not intuitive if you aren't used to those kinds of names.
Yeah, or Parasaurolophus. Wait,
Yes.
I screwed it up.
If they had included pronunciation, so Brian and Jason, the whole time we were playing, were commenting on having fun watching us react to the cards.
Yep.
If they had included pronunciations, you also would have watched us go, that's not how I say it.
Gross. No.
This is wrong. This one's incorrect.
Yeah, I have been part of a number of conversations where pronunciation fights break out of, well, I heard it's technically supposed to be said that way, and everyone else goes, no, I refuse.
Wait, does the holotype not require pronunciation guidance?
It does not.
Oh, no.
I was going to say, I guess if we get technical, they're all in Latin anyway. It's a dead language, so no one's going to come argue with it except other people studying dead Latin things.
And all those dead Romans.
To do just the littlest of tangents, taxonomic names are all Latinized versions of roots from various other languages that are then pronunciation modified based on whatever language the person speaking speaks.
Yep.
So not only is there not a correct pronunciation, there also isn't, you can't have consistent pronunciation because English speakers are not the only people who talk about dinosaurs, and an Italian speaker or a Russian speaker or a Chinese speaker are not going to be expected to pronounce this list of letters the same way.
I'm starting to think that the omission of pronunciation was not an oversight, but a purposeful choice.
Had I been consulted on this game, I would have suggested leaving it out.
Yeah, it definitely simplifies it. Well, because, there's a bunch that, I've had ones that I've shifted on. That came up, I was on a friend's podcast, and I said Ankylosaurus, and they had a moment of like, oh, have I been saying that wrong my whole life? It's like, no, I used to say Ankylosaurus. Then I hung out with bunches of paleontologists, and they tend to say Ankylosaurus more often, but it doesn't matter. Like, we made up the name for this.
As long as all the letters are accounted for, you're doing okay.
Yep.
Do you want to talk about some of the science in the game?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, let's get into this. I'm looking forward to this because I think there's some deep dives we can go here.
Yeah, so do we want to start with the general or do we want to start with the weird ones?
Let's start with the general.
God, I'm trying to think of the right way to say this. How accurate is science in the game? But I'm not really talking about the dinosaurs. I'm talking about the depiction of paleontology.
Yeah.
Because this really is a game about being a paleontologist. So how is it? I mean, we had our own assumptions, but having not been in an academic paleontology environment, our assumptions may be wrong.
All in all, I liked it.
I think it was they did a good job.
Yes, I think it captures a lot of the stuff well. We made a discovery while we were playing that it makes the most sense if you picture that you're all working in the same department, that you're all working at the same museum or same university, and you're having to share space. So that's you're not rival universities bumping each other out of spots. You're going, it's my turn in the lab. Get out. I have the scanning equipment or the CT machine.
I signed this out for this time
It's
period.
my time. Go work on your paper. Like, go work on your writing. Which is also a nice way to look at the benefit to getting bumped is listen, you've been in the computer lab for the last 5 hours. Get out of here. Go do something else.
Are we encouraging people to touch grass or deal with their hyperfixations?
Yep.
I do like that. Obviously, it's simplified because it has to be because it's a board game. But I like the way that they translated a bunch of different real world aspects of research to the game. That you can go excavating, which is a real thing that we do. You can go to, utilize museum archives and museum collections to get the specimens that you need for your research. You can go to the library and read up on background and all that stuff. That they did a pretty good job accounting for a bunch of the things that are in real life a part of this process.
One of my favorite things they did with that accounting is that they split up getting fossils. So excavating fossils gets you the cubes representing Triassic, Jurassic, Cretaceous, but you don't know what those fossils are yet because they have not been cleaned up and put back together and analyzed. So you don't get a identified dinosaur until you get it from the preparation, from the lab that has now cleaned it up and put it back together. So you may have an idea, because that happens all the time where it's we know it's some kind of sauropod, but we don't know what kind yet because it's still in the rock or it's not put together yet. So we haven't confirmed that it's anything that we haven't already seen. So I like this. Yeah, you know what age it is because you know what rock you were digging in. But until it's been worked through, you don't yet know what dinosaur you're dealing with. I thought that was a nice separation.
And even if you have the fossils, even if you have the specimen, you still have to go do the research. Is this new? So you need the research cubes too.
Yep. You have to confirm it.
And that's a huge part. Is because people will often ask, well, how do you know it's a new species? And the answer is you do a lot of reading.
Yep.
You do a lot of reading and you do a lot of comparisons to cover all of the bases that you can. And then you have to write that all down to prove it.
Yes.
So that when another scientist goes, how did they know this was a new species? All of the you've shown your work.
Yes.
One of the weird things in the game is that there's only the one spot to publish, and I don't understand why only one person in the department can publish at a time. We thought maybe there's a copy editor or something.
I was going to say, that's the biggest reason. For me, it makes sense for it to be one department, that it's like, listen, we announce the papers.
Yeah, when the press release, we don't want our press releases to be competing with each other.
Yeah. That's the only way that one really makes sense.
I also, the arrangement of what fossil sites and dinosaurs and other creatures were available, I was really impressed with.
Yeah.
I really like that they used real life fossil deposits. Like these were places, you'd pick up a card and we would go, oh, cool, I've heard of this. Or sometimes it'd be like, oh, the Morrison Formation.
Yeah.
This is a famous one. This is very cool. And the same thing with the dinosaurs. The dinosaurs, we were using the pterosaur expansion, the marine reptiles. I like that it isn't just shortcut generic dinosaur fossil site. It isn't just shortcut generic predatory dinosaur. And it also isn't just all the famous ones.
Yes.
They did a nice spread of different types of animals, different ages of fossil deposits, which I thought was really nice because that, when you're a kid, this is how you learn about new dinosaurs and different locations where you find fossils, is you see them in books or you see them in games and stuff.
Yeah.
There are absolutely fossil sites that I learned about as a kid because they were in like the Magic School Bus computer game.
Yes.
Oh, really?
Yeah, the Magic School Bus to the time of the Dinosaurs computer game was maybe my most played computer game when I was a kid. That was super fun.
So Holotype does, and we didn't mess with this, it has a stripped down, they call it the basal version, where it's
gotcha.
simplified rules to play with kids.
Oh, that's great.
Nice.
To kind of help deal with that sort of strategic difficulty. Because, a very deep tactical game. Well, I say that. I've played games with Jason's daughters. They would easily kick my butt. So I think a lot of it is how early you get them started.
And that was something I liked from the gameplay side of it, is that there's no rocket launcher. That's the... If you get this, you might as well, we could call the game here sort of thing.
You don't win if you get T-Rex.
Yeah, and I like that because it also meant that you can be kind of competitive, but also if I want to just focus on my pet project or focus on, like, I got really into the common goals because I liked that concept, but also that's a fun thing to add, that every now and then you're doing research that's not on a new species, it's on predatory dinosaurs, or like the bromomites study of, we're looking at coprolites and regurgitolites and this category of things, not specifically one I found. I liked that it meant that you can kind of be strategic on your own, even if you're not, like, I didn't have a full grasp of the game because it was my first time, but I could go, oh, that's interesting, so I'm going to focus my efforts this way, and it wasn't the only option to be focusing on. So I liked that part of the gameplay.
Well, and to piggyback off of what you were talking about a little bit, because you brought up the community goals, so sort of the global goals, which I thought was a really fun part. Yeah, as Brian, you mentioned before, that is a relatively common thing in board games like this. And I think it's so fitting in a science-themed game because science is, by its very nature, a community effort.
Yes.
I think that if to segue a little bit into ways that this game is maybe not as good a representation of real-life science, the game is competitive because that's the kind of game that it is. And I think that science can be competitive. For sure, there's lots of competitive aspects in science, but that's not the part that we celebrate and encourage a whole lot in science. Ideally, we want to all be working together and cooperative. And I like that this game isn't just a competitive board game, that there is this acknowledgement of the research you're doing is contributing to global understanding of these topics. I think that's a really nice, it's not quite a footnote, but it's sort of an aside on top of all of the competitive research stuff in the game, but I like that they included it in there.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, it's a nice balance. The competitive is the cooperative, but you're doing the same thing. But even if this person wins the game, look at all the cool science we learned anyway, right?
Yes.
Well, and on the note of it being competitive and like the fact that it can be, but that's not the way it should be, quote unquote. But there is an argument to be made of, well, if we're trying to simulate it, then there should be some. One of the notes that I think falls into that category that I found very charming is your personal goal, because it's like there's absolutely scientists where it's like, what do you study? It's like, crocs, and it's like, why? Because they're neat. Because that's my favorite. Because I want to study them because they're the best, and that like I'm gonna use any excuse I can to get to go see more crocs. Like, yeah, that happens all the time where researchers have their little personal projects, and it's like, is this what needs to be studied? It's what I want to study.
The personal goal I mentioned before, that sort of role playing aspect. For me, the personal goals were like info on my character sheet, where I was like, oh, I'm a marine reptile researcher.
Yes.
That's what this personal goal tells me, is that I love marine reptiles. And so I was like, yeah, I'm going to scoop up all the marine reptiles. That's great.
So we haven't talked about this, but the 3 different meeples for the 3 different things, I mean, they're personified. Like the paleontologist is a little taller. They're basically, you can tell them apart based on their hats.
Yes.
yes. The grad student had their graduation cap on.
I thought that was very cute.
Which they used the whole time. And I remember, Will, when you were doing yours, you were giving them names, and your grad student was Ian Malcolm, so you had him sitting on his side like he was injured in Jurassic Park.
Yep.
It was hilarious. But I did want to make sure we come back to this idea of the different groups. So the different cards, I don't just want to call them dinosaurs. What is the proper, I guess, reptiles? What's the proper term I should use that is encompassing of both marine reptiles and the dinosaurs and the pterosaurs?
You can call them reptiles.
Okay.
If you want to be scientific, you could call them taxa.
Yep.
As they are all individually named species and such, and so they're taxa.
All right. Well, the taxa then that we have, they're based on a couple different things. The age, right? Triassic, Jurassic, or Cretaceous. The diet, so omnivore, carnivore, or herbivore. That was pretty much it. And then they have these sort of phylogenetic groupings. So we've got our sauropods, our long-necked dinosaurs, our theropods, mostly your T-Rex, your like meat-eating, two-legged. There were a couple, I'm thinking Therizinosaur.
Yes.
Which was, I think the one herbivore, maybe not the only, but the only one I can think of. And then we had our marine reptiles, which is not one group, right?
Yeah.
So I know 3. Are there 4?
There's a bunch.
There's
3 big ones.
Yeah, the 3 big famous ones of plesiosaurs and pliosaurs, which are grouped together, the mosasaurs, and then the ichthyosaurs, which are the like dolphin shark shaped ones.
But there was at least one, I don't know if it was like a nothosaur that was in the game. There are other smaller groups of marine reptiles.
Okay. And then there's the genosaurs, and I had never heard that term before. So what is that?
Dinosaurs are cladistically, right, the way that we classify them, there are 3 major groups of dinosaurs. There are sauropods, the long-necked dinosaurs, which you mentioned. Theropods, the two-legged, mostly meat-eating dinosaurs, which you mentioned. And then there's ornithischians, which is all the rest, mostly herbivores, mostly quadrupeds. That includes your Triceratops and your Stegosaurus and your Ankylosaurus and your Parasaurolophus and all of those. Genosauria is a subset of ornithischian dinosaurs, but it's a subset that includes basically all of them. I think the only thing that is an ornithischian but not within Genosauria are some really basal groups, like Heterodontosaurids might fall out of it. So Genosaur basically is the same thing as ornithischian. It's just that other 3rd major branch of dinosaurs. And I was thinking, because when it came up on the cards, I was like, I don't know what Genosauria is off the top of my head. That's not a very commonly used term. It's a very smooth solution to the problem that the word ornithischia is a really weird word to read and to try to say if you're not familiar with it. And Genosaur is an actual taxonomic term that isn't used very much, but basically means the same thing as ornithischian.
Well, and it's like, I'm familiar with ornithischian, so there's definitely a part of me that's like, Dinosaur, what? But if I was introduced to both cold, I would go with Dinosaur.
Yeah, Dinosaur is a better word.
That's more fun to say.
It's much more accessible. I do want to mention one more thing about because I think this is an important thing when you mention the meeples. On the note of the meeples, the characters that you have, one thing that did stand out to me about when we were playing the game, it was really the one thing of the game that I went a little bit like, ugh, I don't love this representation, which is that your three characters are the paleontologist, the grad student, and the field assistant. And there is a very clear hierarchy of who gets to do what and who's more important than the other ones. The field assistant doesn't get to publish. The paleontologist gets to kick the other two off of any spots. And I think that does reflect, some real life hierarchical systems in places like universities. But I do think that it also a little bit reinforces this caste system almost.
Yeah, power dynamic.
That no, field assistants absolutely can publish stuff. They're usually working alongside other people. This is much more of a personal semantics thing, but separating paleontologist from grad student makes me, the hackles are up a little bit, because I'm like, well, if you're a grad student, if you published a dinosaur and you're out doing field work and you're doing the research, you're a paleontologist.
Yeah.
So for the sake of the game, I think that hierarchy system mechanically works very well. I think that it's really an engaging way to play, but it reflects upon real world paleontology in a way that I think is a little bit overly stereotypical.
Yeah. And it's a little icky too, but
it's a little icky. And then, I think that, not to as a slight against the people who made the game, I think they did a great job. But that is a kind of real-world aspect of paleontology that is a little bit icky in its gamified form.
Yeah, yeah.
I've got other questions, though, about the science here. One is about the places we get the fossils from. So you get three types of fossils. You get your Triassic, your Jurassic, your Cretaceous, and they're different. The older ones are more valuable. But what are these things? The game is Mesozoic North America. So all three of these periods are inside the Mesozoic. What is the Mesozoic? What are these little three subdivisions? How do people draw boundaries between them? I assume an asteroid was involved in the last one. But, I don't know. I don't know about any of the others. So what defines these three periods? What defines the three periods?
Yes, absolutely. So the Mesozoic is often what we call the age of dinosaurs. And
from roughly 250 million to 66 million years ago.
Yes. And like all period, all phases of Earth history, we break it up into subsections. Like the Triassic, Jurassic, and Cretaceous also have subdivisions that you get into when you research is zooming in even further or looking at a very particular time frame. There are names for those. These typically are associated with rock layers and deposits and sediment layers. You will find ages, like there are the ancient mammal ages, the large mammal ages, land mammal ages, I had to get my term right, in North America. That is based off of what fossils are present, but typically we're basing it off of using geologic sediments to distinguish, and the borders are often at major shifts.
Environmental changes, ecological changes. The asteroid at the end of the Cretaceous is not so much. There is a geological layer that you can see. Yeah, that's asteroid dust. But the shift from Cretaceous to what comes next is an ecological shift.
Yes.
Because there was a mass extinction.
Yep. And mass extinctions are very commonly the bookends.
It's a great way to distinguish between before and after.
Yep. And so, we can identify these either based on sediment types, that there are certain things that, we can age and go, well, it has to be this because the radioactive elements that are in this rock date it to that time period. And then very often the fossils that we find of this group is only a Triassic group. They were in the middle of the Triassic, so there's not even a way they could be scooting over the line. So for sure, we're definitely in the Triassic. And so there are fossil sites that are already well known for what age they are. Anything you find here is going to be that age. You just might be finding some new thing from that age that you haven't seen before.
So I like that there is a part of this game that is the different trace fossils.
Yeah.
And I'd like to actually talk a bit about those. So they have a few different kinds. They've got the eggs, they've got coprolites, so poop, dinosaur tracks, bugs in amber, I think, or something like that. I don't remember how many are in the base game and how many are in the expansion. How important are these to paleontology? Like we've already talked about some of the ones, but what other types of trace fossils are there? What role do they play in terms of paleontology and figuring things out? Yeah, and the ultimate question is like, how long until we can actually get DNA out of a fossilized mosquito and make Jurassic Park?
Right.
So, trace fossils are categorized broadly into two categories. Body fossils, which are the remains of the body parts. Bones, teeth, leaves, anything that was part of the body of the organism. Trace fossils are indirect evidence of the organism. Footprints are trace fossils, burrows, poop, regurgitolites, cololites, all the things that we were talking about before. Amber is sort of a plant trace fossil because amber is produced by plants. Eggs are a trace fossil. Trace fossils are extraordinarily important because they can not only tell you what sort of things might have been around if you don't have body fossils, but they also reveal behaviors and lifestyles. Footprints tell you how an animal was moving around its environment. Nests with eggs tell you a lot about reproduction. Coprolites, poop, tell you about diet. You cut open a coprolite and there's what this animal ate. So you get a lot of really fascinating information that you often can't get from bones and teeth. To Jason's question about amber in mosquitoes and DNA, I have an answer to that is a short story. The earliest reports of DNA coming out of bugs in amber was from the early 90s, around the time that Jurassic Park came out. And then throughout the 90s, there were a bunch more reports of DNA from amber. And then as more and more time went on, those studies were revised as we got better and better at recognizing DNA contamination in our specimens, like what we were talking about before. And after a decade or so, general consensus became that those were all accidents, that those were all errors, that there was not DNA in those bugs in amber. More recent research after that tried to estimate how long DNA could potentially last in the environment and estimated that DNA could not probably last more than a couple million years, which is not nearly enough to get to dinosaurs. And then my favorite, this was a 2013 study that sought to see, okay, what does DNA breakdown actually look like in amber? And they tested with all the updated methods 2 pieces of amber from museum specimens, one of which was, I think, 10,000 years old or so. And they found no evidence of preserved DNA in the bug in the amber. And another piece of pre-amber that was about 50 or 60 years old, and they found no evidence of preserved DNA in that bug in amber.
50 years?
About 50 years old. It seems that DNA is actually extra bad at preserving that in amber. The amber is actually an awful place to try to preserve DNA.
It's one of the worst ones you could pick if you were trying to save some DNA aside.
Amber does a great job.
I know.
Protecting like tissues and stuff from scavengers and decomposers, but it does a very bad job protecting DNA from heat and moisture, which is what breaks down DNA. Okay. So to answer your question, never. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry, Jason.
Bummer.
Oh well.
So I think we have a little bit of time for nitpicks, and then we should probably wrap up with our grades, if that's okay.
I've got a nitpick to come right off of that coprolite discussion. There is a stipulation within this game that the trace fossils coprolites cannot be used for marine reptiles. That you can only attach a coprolite poop to the dinosaurs and pterosaurs and such. And when we were playing the game, I think it was Brian who asked, "Do you not get coprolites from marine fossils?" And I said, "Yeah, you do. Mm-hmm. You absolutely can get coprolites from marine fossils."
There's a famous one that has a whole bunch of shark bites on it.
Yeah, it's a croc poop.
Yep.
With shark bite marks in it.
Yep.
Oh, lovely.
So yeah, absolutely, you could get fossil poops from ocean animals.
I'm sorry. Okay, so it pooped, a bunch of sharks nibbled on it, and then it got buried?
Yes,
Yep.
absolutely.
Yep.
That is exactly what happened.
Paleontology is weird.
Yeah.
Coprolites in the water are so fun because you'll see like a shark or a croc coprolite, and you can see the shape of the coprolite has a flat surface.
Yes.
Where it landed.
Yeah.
Like you can see this is the side that it landed on.
Yeah.
And it got squished into that shape.
Oh, man.
A lot of fish coprolites are spiral shaped
Yeah.
because of the shape of their
I've
sphincter.
had goldfish. Yeah,
Yeah. Like, it's when you watch it happen in an aquarium, it looks like that when it fossilizes.
Yep. A lot of coprolites have like a pinched off end.
Yep.
Yeah, it looks like poop. That's what it is. It's poop.
Are there left-handed and right-handed fish coprolites then?
Ooh.
That is a great question.
I don't know.
I don't know off the top of my head, but probably.
I mean, I don't know what would cause a spiral, but I mean, something's making it twist.
Yeah. This is a very nitpick. Is also with the trace fossils, that the way you get points off of trace fossils is by adding them to a publication when you publish a holotype. Which I get the concept of you're applying I am publishing Triceratops, and here are some Triceratops footprints. But that's not actually how we publish trace fossils. When we publish a trace fossil, we publish an ichnotaxon, which is a taxonomic name for that trace fossil, because the reality is that usually you cannot match a trace fossil to its owner. You can get close a lot of the time, like you almost certainly could go, these are ceratopsian feet because we have the feet of many ceratopsians.
Right. And there's a Triceratops skeleton 30 meters away.
But we don't have the fleshy pad of that foot. So there's a lot of information in this track that is missing from the bones. Mm-hmm. Like, if you looked at a duck's foot versus a duck's foot bones, that's a lot of webbing and material that you don't actually have, and you may not actually be able to confirm on the bone. Like, you may be able to say, yeah, this is definitely a web foot, but how webbed? Did it go all the way to the end of the toes? Did it stop halfway down? Mm-hmm. And so finding a trace fossil is not actually something you can typically, unless you have a overabundance of evidence, attached to a known species. So it gets its own name and suspected.
And its own holotype. So, trace fossils get their own holotypes.
And the one that stands out the most for that is that amber. Like, amber, typically, you're describing, like, the bugs and stuff that got trapped in that amber. And that's its own fossil. So the amber itself is kind of a trace fossil, but whatever's in it, that's just a fossil.
Yeah.
And so those you really should be publishing on their own.
Yes.
Okay, so trace fossils are not bonus points that get tacked on to other fossils.
Yeah.
They're their own study, their own separate study. They'll be in association, but you would have had to already publish that holotype typically to then be able to connect them.
I think that's a great nitpick. I hadn't thought about that, but that's a really good point.
I mean, I would love to nitpick as well. My only nitpick, if this even counts, is that these people apparently never have to write grants or teach classes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a great point.
Yeah, that's not on there. It's like, I'm not sad that's missing. Like, I like teaching classes, but if I could ditch the grant right,
it would be so cool if you could, if one of the places on the map was like scientific conference.
Yeah.
And you could like exchange research cubes or
that could be
whatever.
That could be an expansion, adds a little bit to the board, and you go, that'd be neat.
It's like a sidetrack for publication, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
That you can get almost to publication, but it's not quite publication.
You go to the conference and it like ups all of your resources, and it's just motivation.
Yes.
you get like new personal goals.
Yeah.
Like you could acquire a new personal goal.
We need
or
more
something.
opportunities for collaborations. We need joint
Yes.
goals, public goals, and then private goals between two
Oh.
people. That's
If you
making
could,
it
like,
way too complicated.
Expand the global goals.
Yeah,
list
it's not a bad
actually
idea.
Would be pretty
Like
cool.
put a new
Or maybe
one
like
down.
switch one out. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, switching one out would be mean. I don't like that one.
It's like, no, we don't want to do this one. This one's not important anymore. No
And then
one's
three
funding
people at
this.
the table go, no!
That actually would be funny. You go to a conference and you have to chuck one, then you pull in a new one. Anyway, let's do our letter grades. Let's start with the fun. How fun is Holotype to play? We do typically kind of use a little bit of grade inflation. We often start at a B. You guys don't have to do this if you don't
Yeah.
want to.
No, I
we
like
do it.
this.
My understanding is that you very specifically chose not to be in academia. So
I haven't graded a paper in years. For fun, I would give it an A.
Yeah.
I had a ton of fun playing it.
No, I really enjoyed it.
I named my meeples.
Yeah.
I had Ellie, Rhonda, and Darcy.
Yep.
Which I was very happy with. They were great. They were kicking butt.
Yeah. No, I mean, at the worst, it'd be like low A, but yeah, no, I think it's up there. That was a very fun game.
So A minus then.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
yeah, I'd give this a solid A, venturing into
Yeah.
A plus. I mean, I think of the games we have played as part of this podcast, this is one of the most fun. This is right up there with the dreaded Wingspan that we can't get away with mentioning. But I say it's valuable on this one because darn it, birds are dinosaurs.
Yes.
That's a very good point. Our top scorers have all had some kind of dinosaurs or dinosaur-like thing in them.
how you
I
do
guess
it.
Mitosis didn't, but those dinosaurs had cells, so it's fine. I'm biased because I had a fantastic time playing the game with you guys. It was so much fun doing it. I'm not going to let that influence me though, because I don't have to, because it's an A. Because for me, it's how like I am to grab it and bring it with us. And I mean, I took it with us when we went home for Thanksgiving to play with my family. Like,
You took it in a 14-hour car ride. Like that's dedication.
so on the science side, why don't I go ahead and start? It's interesting because the science in terms of the dinosaurs, the formations, all of that clearly accurate, but this really isn't about that. It's about paleontology itself. Now, there's always some simplification. There has to be, because it's a game. It's not going to be 100% accurate. But I think this deserves an A too. I think there was a clear intentionality in the design and the metaphor of the game to do a good job of representing what it was trying to represent.
Yeah. No, I think I agree because there are nitpicks. There are definitely categories that and for our specific field of expertise stand out. But none of those were like distracting me, aggressively or anything. So yeah, I think B feels too low for any of those. So A still feels fitting because it was satisfying in the scientific regard, right?
You can go in between. You can give it a B plus or an A minus if you want.
That's true. That's true.
I was going to say I would give it an A minus at the lowest.
Yes.
A, maybe an A minus if I'm feeling,
critical.
If I'm grouchy that day. But I think because of what you guys just said, that there's clearly a great intent here. I think that also I'm grading in comparison to other games, and it is very rare that you see a game put in this level of effort to be accurate, not only to be accurate, but to be thorough, to include a wide range of real-life science stuff. There are a couple things in there that made me go, I don't love the implication of, you've sort of translated this thing over from the real world, and it's a little bit ick. But the other thing that I think gets at the A is that stepping back from the hyper-specifics of the science, I think this is exactly the kind of game that would make somebody excited about science.
Yeah.
I think getting to play through the process of it, using a lot of the real pieces of science, I don't think that the inaccuracies or the weird sort of parts of it would be enough to counter the fact that this is an extremely fun scientific interaction. Like, this is the kind of game that I could see a future paleontologist saying, when I was a kid, I played Holotype.
Yeah.
And that's how I got excited about dinosaurs.
Yeah.
I hope that happens. That's going to happen sometime, right? It's got to.
I'm also going to give this a solid A for the same reasons. It's a good representation. It has a lot of details about paleontology and the dinosaurs and the dig sites and everything that don't have to be there, but they made the effort of doing it. They made the effort to get a lot of stuff there. And I think you said about our other dinosaur game, Brian, you can't play this game without learning something about dinosaurs.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I actually think I really like the representation of paleontology, because I think a lot of people, like your sort of casual, like child paleontologists, think that people are all out in the field digging up dinosaurs all the time. And isn't it great? Like that scene in Jurassic Park. It's like, well, that's part of it.
Yes.
But this actually shows you have to do a lot of book research. You have to go back to the lab. You have to go to museums. Most of your work is actually not at the field site. And I think that's actually a good way of portraying what the real job is like.
Yeah, no, I agree, because it is so often portrayed as it's digging up a bone and going, aha, eureka!
Right.
I have found a new species.
I think that one of the nicest things that I can say about this game is that it feels great for one of the main reasons that Jurassic Park, the movie, feels great.
Yeah.
Which is that it is not just about dinosaurs, it is about paleontology.
Yes.
And that really sets it apart, and that really makes it entrenched in the science behind this field.
Well, we should probably call it there. I'm sure we could keep talking and talking. I would love to do so, but I do have to edit this at some point.
Yeah, I know the feeling.
Where would you like our listeners, this very small number of people who listen to our podcast,
Hey, be
find
optimistic. We could have people from 5 years in the future out of our millions and millions of subscribers who are coming back to listen to Holotype.
Yes, absolutely.
There
I'm
you
sorry,
go.
dear listeners, I apologize. We're happy to have you here, but really, go listen to Common Descent, okay? I'm going to tell you where to find them. Go listen to Common Descent. Join their Discord. It's a great community, and come to Dragon Con and see them in person.
Absolutely. You can find Common Descent wherever you get your podcasts. We have a Discord. We're on some of the social medias. We have a website, commondescentpodcast.com. We release episodes about various topics in paleontology, and at various parts of the year, we also do deep dives into science of movies, and we do speculative evolution projects in October for Halloween, and we do all sorts of fun evolution, paleontology type stuff.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, hopefully we have the opportunity to get together again. I mean, this is the paleontology game, so we may have to stretch at some point to make that happen. But
we got that Nature Ecologies game sent to us, and I went through and I looked through all the cards, and I played a little around with myself, and it's pretty cool actually. That might be fun to play.
Yeah,
it looks
for sure.
neat.
I'm not kidding. I'll get in the car. I'll be there.
Absolutely. Come on up.
Absolutely.
Well, I think we're just going to have to call it there. So thanks so much, Will, David, for taking the time. And now we always come to the part that happens every time where I never know how to end the episode. So I'm going to let Jason do it.
Well, thank you, Will and David, for being here. Thank you, everyone, for listening. And have a great month and happy gaming.
Have fun playing dice with the universe. See ya. This has been the Gaming with Science podcast, copyright 2025. Listeners are free to reuse this recording for any non-commercial purpose, as long as credit is given to Gaming with Science. This podcast is produced with support from the University of Georgia. All opinions are those of the hosts and do not imply endorsement by the sponsors. If you wish to purchase any of the games that we've talked about, we encourage you to do so through your friendly local game store. Thank you, and have fun playing dice with the universe.